Hi everyone, Jane here. Thank you for watching my video today. Today I am going to be decorating the front cover of this journal that I made. I made it on a recent video and I just put it together using patterned papers that I no longer use. So I just cut them to the size I wanted, added some hole punches into each page, and I just made a cover using some old cardboard packaging. But I did ask in that video if you would like for me to decorate it as part of a video as well, and I got many people saying to me that yes, that's something they would like to see. So that is what I'm going to do in the video today, and I'm going to just be doing the front cover. So I've already got a couple of mediums out ready to use. So I've got my white gesso and I've got some cream paste, and I'm going to be adding embellishments and texture and colour and probably some gilding waxes, all sorts on here. But I'm thinking that as these are very much a vintage style paper in here, I'd go with a vintage style and theme for the cover. Just to be aware though, that if you do intend to make your own covers for journals out of cardboard, just remembering that it is just cardboard and you do need to sort of watch the amount of liquids and things that you're adding into it and making sure that each layer is dried properly. With that being said, that's also why I'm going to do this as a time-lapse video, because I find that otherwise mixed media and textured videos just take far too long for me to have them on my channel, because long videos don't tend to do as well. People don't want to watch those sorts of videos as much, but I will be doing a voiceover so that I can give you all the information as I am making it of what I'm using and, you know, the processes and techniques that I am doing for the project. I will, as always, list what I have used in the description box below. Just a reminder that I do not have affiliated links, so any links I don't get anything from, so do please check your local retailers, shop around, check, you know, compare prices if you're ever buying anything. But my overwhelming thing I would always say is check what you've got in your stash first, because you may have things, even if you don't have exactly the same to make a project, you will have similar, or you know, be able to substitute things out for things that maybe you prefer. And so with that being said, I hope that if you enjoy this video, you give it a thumbs up, and if you are not already subscribed, that you consider subscribing to my channel, and I will see you soon. Bye. I started preparing my piece of cardboard with some white gesso. This acts as a primer, but also because I don't want too much liquid being able to go into the cardboard, it's also sort of being a bit of a barrier for me as well, so sort of sealing in a bit more of that porousness, if that's even such a word. So I've put on a coat on the front, but at this point I'm just putting on just one coat just to sort of put a little bit of a barrier on there for me. So I'm using my giant Dina Wakley brush. I don't often get a chance to use it, so this was quite handy, and I am drying it with the heat tool. You don't need to do that. I was just doing this for speed rather than anything else. Now I wanted to have some nice texture right across, sort of a low level texture. And so I'm using this stencil from Finnabair by Prima, and it's called Vintage Wallpaper. It's one of my favourite vintagey stencils to use. Now, quite often I don't use the whole stencil, but today I thought I wanted it across the entire background. So I'm using the Stamperia cream paste. I've had this paste quite a long time and it's still in really good condition. So it just shows that if you look after your products properly, they should last you, hopefully. Now, once that was thoroughly dry, and I did leave it to really dry, I've collected together a collection of wood, resin and metal and MDF embellishments. And here I've got a piece of gauze or cheesecloth as well, because I thought I wanted to put a base down of texture to start with, and I wanted to get my composition in place. Now I'm using some heavy body gel from Decoart. Again, this is another one I've had quite a long time and it's still fine. The other gel I have on the table is the Dina Wakley thick gel medium, extra thick gel medium. I use that later as well. So I'm putting down a really sort of generous amount of gel. I wanted this to really stick in place. Now I intend with this journal to really build up quite a heavy 3D sort of look to the front, and I'm doing this because I know that this journal is one where I take out the pages to use. Now if I was creating a journal where I use the pages within it, as in it was sewn in or something like that, I wouldn't be creating such a textured heavy cover to it. But because I know it's not going to have to be on there whilst I'm actually using the journal, that's fine. And that is something to sort of be aware of when you're decorating a journal. I mean, if you're decorating a journal after you've finished, you know, all the pages, then that's fine. You can do what you like on the cover because it's not going to affect it. But do be aware that if it's a journal that you're going to be using and you want it to maybe lay flat, that's something that you still need it to be able to do. So what I'm doing is I'm using that heavy body gel. Now it will squish between some of these elements, but it's going to dry clear and I'm going to be painting over it. I'm not worried about it having a bit of a grungy look, so for me it's not going to be a problem. But what you can do is you can sort of like pick out those bits that squish through a bit more carefully than I do, to make sure it's a lot cleaner. So I know that that frame isn't going to be flat to the surface of the cover because I've got that piece of wood with the clock underneath. So then what I'm doing is I'm adding in the bits at the bottom, the metal embellishments, to create like a counterpoint to where the wooden clock is. So I've got something for it to stick to because it needs to have, you know, points where it's going to be stuck down to the actual cover. So like I say, I'm using a lot of gel. You probably don't need to use as much as me. I do have a tendency when I am gluing to go a bit maybe over the top. I like to make sure things are properly stuck down. So you see with that little silicone tool, what I'm doing is then if I get really lots and lots of squish from the gel, I am then just pulling it off with that silicone tool and just wiping it away, just so that it maybe doesn't make quite as much mess. But as I say, I am going to be sort of covering all of this up. Now I had put a lot of gel medium onto this project so far, so I left it all to dry thoroughly overnight and waited through to the next day to start working on it. You can heat your gel medium a little bit to help it to set a bit quicker. I don't like doing that because it does then tend to sort of melt it first before it then reheats, which can make it really, really hot. And also if you've got metal embellishments, you can accidentally burn yourself as well with those. And so I do prefer to just leave it alone, let it set itself. And I think you get the best look and result. So I wanted to now unify everything. So I added a coat of gesso to start with, and I'm just putting it over everything. So now everything will have a primed surface to use and it will all be coherent, not coherent, cohesive. It'll be cohesive and everything will work together. So I'm making sure I'm getting into those little pieces, and I will, not on camera, but I will go back and add extra onto these. So, but letting it dry or making sure it's dry in between each layer so that I can really cover up all of those elements with the gesso. So here you can see I have given this all a number of coats. Some elements need more than others. You know, wooden things tend to take your gesso quite well. Your metal things might take a little bit more sometimes. So I'm using a range of acrylic paints. I decided to go with acrylic because it's a journal cover. It's going to be handled. And I think sometimes if you're going to be handling something, you need a product on it that is not going to be coming away with the, you know, the oils and the water and moisture from your hands. And if you use things that are more water reactive, that's going to happen. So I'm using a mixture of different colours from IndigoBlu. So I'm starting off here with the Porcelain, which is a very pale colour. In the end, you're not going to see very much, but that's the thing. When you're building up this type of mixed media, you sometimes add things that you maybe think, well, what was the point? Because I'm not going to see it at the end, but it all adds to the, you know, the end look. So I'm just adding a bit in, and I'm adding water into it to make it more fluid, because I don't want it to be clumped into places. I want it to look more blended. And you can add water to your acrylics, obviously not into your pot. You don't want to water down your actual acrylic, but you can add it in to your project and help it to flow. Obviously, as I said before, just do be aware that if you're working on something like a piece of cardboard packaging, that you are drying thoroughly in between each lot so that you're not over saturating the card. By this point, there was so much gesso and texture paste and everything else on this piece of cardboard, I don't think it was even getting into the fibres of the cardboard anymore. So this second colour was Warm Tan, and as always I will list everything that I have used in the description box below. And if this sort of project is something that you think is worthwhile me every now and again putting onto my channel, I can certainly do that. Oh, it won't replace my main art journaling, because I think that is where most of my joy lies, and these projects are quite time consuming in terms of how much time they take to dry and building it all up. So but if every now and again you would like to see me do something like this, I can certainly put that in as well. Just let me know in the comments. So this third colour, I felt that I didn't initially get this colour out, but I thought it needed a bit more darkness, and I'm concentrating now the darker colour around that frame. So I want that to sort of, as though it's the shadow, and this colour is Leather Corset. And so I am really heavily putting it in to start with, but lots and lots of water to water this out. So once this had dried, I felt it looked a bit too much. So this is when you start adding things in to bring out that texture, because all that dark colour has sort of unified it too much now. So I'm going back into the Porcelain, but this time I am just using a very dry brush with a very small amount of paint. So you will see me dip my brush in the paint, then I will wipe a lot of it off onto my mat, and then I'm just very gently sort of hitting where the texture is. So now I'm going in with the peppermint tea and doing the same, and you will see that the lighter colour is now mostly catching on top of that texture. So you're keeping the dark in the background, which is what I want, because that's why I put it in there, to create those shadows, but now I'm creating the highlights. So when you're building up textures and things, that's really what you're looking at. You're looking at creating shadows and creating highlights with the darks and the lights. So that's that contrast that people often talk about. So I'm going also into the background a little bit, because I wanted to take a bit of that stark white off as well. So here it is with all the paint, but I wasn't completely finished with adding in the texture, and I'm now using gilding wax. Now you might be able to see from my gilding waxes, they are very, very old. They are very well used, very well loved. They're getting a bit dry, so they're a bit more tricky to get out. So I've got a couple of golds. I can't remember exactly what they're called, but I'm sure if you search Pebeo gilding wax, they would come up. One is a much lighter gold, and one is a more bronzier gold. And I wanted to use them both. So I'm just putting a little bit on my finger, and then I'm being gentle to start with. The thing with gilding wax is, especially this one, because this is a solvent based one, so you don't want to be putting on too much to start with. Start light. You can always add extra, you can always build up, but if you put too much on, it's very difficult with gilding wax to then remove it. So always start light and then gradually build up. So after I'd put the lighter colour on, I'm sort of going in again that contrast, so making some darker highlights. I'm trying not to cover up everything I've already done. I'm adding it just in places, so it gives that sort of old, worn away gold look on my cover. So I think I'm really getting that vintage vibe. I really did want something to go in that frame. So this little image I got from, I had like a stack of postcards. They're not original postcards, you know, the reproductions. I think they were from IndigoBlu as well, actually. And on the cover of the photo of the pack, there were smaller versions, and this little girl was on that cover. So I cut it out to start with my smallest oval die, which still wasn't small enough, so I did have to trim it with my scissors, which meant it had a bit of a look. I didn't like how I'd cut it, but I then distressed the edges and I added a little bit of ink. I've added it into the frame on some foam pads, but I've also added in the gel medium. The foam pads are not going to be strong enough to go on top of all this texture. And I do the same with this sentiment, which is one from, I think it's 7 Dot Studio. I've had them a long time. I think I'll have to put in the description what collection it was. And again, I've added on foam pads just to give it a bit of dimension, but I did want it to stick properly, so I've added on the gel medium. Now, because I've got a sort of a gap around the edges of the photo, I'm adding in some pearls. Now, these pearls are all different sizes. This is the vintage pearls that do these are from Pretty Gets Gritty, and I'm using the gel medium from Dina Wakley this time to add these in. Now, as I'm adding them, it may look a bit like, oh my goodness, it's what a mess, because at this point the gel medium looks white, but it will dry clear, and it's got enough body so that the pearls can actually sit in it, and it helps them to stick better, and it gives a really, really strong bond. So if you're doing anything where you've got a lot of layers of texture and embellishments like this, a thick gel medium is really probably the best sort of adhesive to use. Also, because of the sort of adhesive it remains to an extent flexible. Some people use glue guns, which if you're in a rush is, you know, they will work and they work very quick. But because a glue gun is glue gun is really hot and then cools quite quickly, over time that glue will become quite brittle. And I'm talking from experience, I have had projects where after a time the elements will come off because the glue has gone very, very dry and brittle, and then they just break off. But with the glue gels, because it's a longer drying, so of course you're not going to get that instant stick. You're going to have to leave it to dry, and I did have to leave this a long time to dry. It then dries slower and it stays more flexible, and it's better in the long term. I have things on my walls that I made years ago that are still totally fine. And they don't fall off. So once I'd stuck all of those little pearls around the frame, I needed to carry that on into the main piece. The main thing I find with building any sort of composition is you want a bit of repetition. You don't want there just to be one thing that's in one place. You want to repeat it within your piece. And then that sort of is how our brains like to work, because they can see, you know, that pattern within your work. So I'm adding I like to add my pearls in little clusters. I just prefer the look. I think if I was just to put one pearl here, one pearl there, it'd look a bit odd. Now I've got a lot of glue still sitting there, and I'm concerned that when this dries there's going to be gaps. So these little tiny things are micro beads, and I'm being very careful when I put them on. I don't want them going everywhere. I just want to really try to catch them in the remaining glue. So here is my final piece. I hope you enjoyed seeing this, a bit different to my usual content. And if you did, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button. And until the next time, bye-bye.